Everyone, welcome to our webinar. Let's just wait a few minutes as we like a very short time, no, to allow some of the participants to trickle in to the webinar. In the meantime, I'd like to ask everyone to please change your names change your Zoom room names to show your name, your affiliation, and where you're from. So again, I'll just ask the participants as we go on with the webinar to please change your names to reflect your name and your affiliation and where you're from. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Now, while we're waiting for the other participants to join, let's watch a couple of videos from Greenpeace Philippines Love 52 election campaign.
Bilang iyong mga mamamayan, utang namin ang aming buhay sa iyo. Respeto, pangangalaga at pagmamahal sa aming tinubuang lupa ang pinakamaliit naming maibabalik. Pinapangako naming isapuso ito, mahal na inang bayan, habang kami ay nakikilahok sa pinakamahalagang halalan para sa ating kinabukasan. Hindi namin sasayangin ang iyong pag-asa.
Kaakibat ng aming pagtatapat ng pagmamahal ay ang aming paghingi ng tawad, mahal na inang bayan. Ikaw at ang kalikasan ay aming napabayaan. Hinayaan namin ang mga makapangyarihan at mga makasariling interes na wasakin ang iyong mga likas na yaman. Dinumihan nila ang hangin, pinuno ng basurang plastik ang mga dagat at lungsod, at patuloy na pinalala ang krisis pagklimang nagdadala sa iyo ng taunang mapangwasak na mga bagyo, tagtuyot at kagutuman. Ang aming mga kababayan ay nawalan ng kabuhayan at mga mahal sa buhay, habang nananatili tayong nasa panganib.
Thank you. Sorry, let me turn on my video. Sorry. Thank you, Greenpeace, for those videos. Welcome, everyone, to Learn by the Nuggets, Sachet Phase-Out, Critical Agenda for a Pro-Environment and Pro-Poor Electoral Candidate. My name is Gob. I'm with the Eco Waste Coalition, and I will be the moderator for this afternoon's webinar. I am a senior policy campaigner with the Eco Waste Coalition, and I'm based in Cebu City in the Philippines. This webinar is organized by the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, or GAIA, the Asia Pacific office, and by Greenpeace Philippines. GAIA is a global alliance of over 800 organizations in over 90 countries that has been working for a just, waste-free world for nearly 20 years now. Greenpeace is an independent campaigning organization which uses peaceful, creative confrontation to expose global environmental problems and develop solutions for a green and peaceful future. Their goal is to ensure the ability of the Earth to nurture life in all its diversity. That means they want to protect biodiversity in all its forms, prevent pollution and abuse of the Earth's ocean, land, air, and fresh water, end all nuclear threats, and promote peace, global disarmament, and non-violence. Ladies and gentlemen, we are recording this live, and this will be available on Gaia Asia Pacific and Greenpeace Philippines FB page. Participants may post additional questions, and speakers will post their answers on the page. This recorded session will also be uploaded to the official YouTube channel. So once again, today we are having a webinar titled Sachet Phaseout, Critical Agenda for a Pro-Environment and Pro-Poor Electoral Candidate. This is inspired by our commitment towards a circular economy in the region by promoting sustainable solutions to burgeoning waste pollution, not just in Asia Pacific, but in the entire world. The webinar aims to stress the need to phase out sachets, highlight existing real pro-environment and pro-poor options to sachets, and to make sachet phase-out a critical policy agenda for the next 6 years. Furthermore, this is a call for all local governments and donors to fund more sustainable solutions to zero waste. Like zero waste. So, before we dive in, a few admin matters. First, the webinar will last 1.5 hours. Second, please use the Q&A section in your Zoom screen to send questions to the speakers. Please don't use the chat box. Right? So again, you please use the Q&A section to post questions to the speakers. Later, we may unmute those in Zoom for their questions, but we cannot promise that we can accommodate everyone. Third, please remember that questions can still be posted a few minutes after the session. You can also send that through email and we'll try our best to respond. If you experience any technical issues with your internet connection, for instance, or with Zoom, please connect our technical support team through the chat box. And finally, just to give you a quick view of what's going to happen in the next 1.5 hours. So we will have a quick introduction of our speakers one by one, and then we'll lead directly to discussing the sachet issue in the Philippines, their experiences, what their organizations are doing specifically in regard to busting the myth that sachets are pro-poor. I hope those instructions were clear. If you have any questions, again, please just post them on the Q&A section, and we'll try our best to respond to them quickly. So, going now to the meat of our webinar, allow me to begin by introducing our speakers. Right? Joining me today is first Colleen Salamat. She is a plastic solutions campaigner with the Aquarius Coalition. Hi, Colleen. Colleen is the plastic solutions campaigner of the Aquarius Coalition. She's an environmental advocate with a background in oceans and waste management issues. She was previously a campaigner with Oceana Philippines and is also a member of Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines and a consultant of research of the Asian Research Institute for Environmental Law. Second, we have Jefferson Chua, who is a plastics campaigner with Greenpeace Southeast Asia Philippines. He's had prior experience in local government environmental management in Makati City, intergovernmental work on cultural and natural heritage management with UNESCO, and the academy. His research interests include memory studies and social volcanology. He also has a cat. Third, we have Laarni Cancho, who is one of the co-founders of Back to Basics Eco Store. She is also the entrepreneur behind Simply Green and Natural Eco Shop, an online shop that offers products that support zero waste journeys, healthy lifestyles, and green beauty. She was a former bank executive who decided to leave the corporate world to focus on setting up and growing advocacy-driven businesses. And finally, we have Ma'am Mercy Ferrer. She is the co-founder of War on Waste, Break Free from Plastic, Negros Oriental. After joining the first Zero Waste Academy held in the city of Malabon last April 27. The Dumaguete City-based NGO has been instrumental in growing the zero waste movement in the province through model building, mentoring environmental youth groups, and campaigning against all solutions. So, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all our panelists and speakers for sharing your time with us. We are honored to have such intelligent and hardworking environmental warriors with us this afternoon. So let's jump right now. Enough about me, and let's listen. Let's now move on to listening to our speakers and panelists as they share with us their experiences. So let's start by calling on Ms. Colleen Salamat of the Aquarius Coalition.
Hi everyone. So for today, I'm gonna present like a situationer of Sachet in the Philippines. Well, first, the Aquarius Coalition is a network of church, school, youth, environmental and health groups with a common goal to end wasting through promotion of environmental justice and stewardship. So if you notice here in the first picture, this is actually what it looked like before. On the picture on the left shows a 1945 photo of a sari-sari store. And the photo on the right is what it looks like now. And if you notice here, the bulk of sachet in the country, this is very evident in each sari-sari store in the Philippines. And when you go to the Philippines, when you go to a certain street, there would be like 2 to 3 sari-sari stores, and they all look kind of like the same. But when you compare to it, in the contrary, during the 1945 and during the 40s, when you notice here, the products was actually bought in bulk, and the consumers would bring their own containers and containers, cups, or even spoon. For example, just to buy a salt. When they buy a salt, they would actually purchase it using a spoon, and they will transfer it to their containers. So that's what it was before in the 1940s. But now, because of the boom of the fast-moving consumer goods, because of the multinational companies producing sachets, this has actually started. Technically, the production of plastic just started in the 1950s, but really the boom of these industries goes way back in the year 2000. So it was just kind of like 20 years ago. And if you notice, of course, this is actually a big problem in the Philippines. But what drives it? What drives the sachet economy? Number one is the Western orientation. If you notice here in the photo, these are products by Unilever, Procter and Gamble, and multinational companies, even Nestle here on the side. And the concept of the Filipino that, if it came from the Western countries, if it came from multinational companies, then the tendency is that they would buy it. They feel like the tendency to buy goods from other countries have actually leveraged than those from local. And next is the low propensity to save. Filipinos have this term of a one-day millionaire, or the instant gratification. So each time there's a 15th month pay or a 30th month pay, the tendency is that they spend more during those dates. And in our country, having savings is actually a privilege. So for them, it's actually also connected to affordability and accessibility, because the tendency is that when they buy in sachet, that they feel like they save more. When they buy less, when they buy in the smaller pieces, the mentality is that they actually save more. That's the thingy culture that's what we are talking about. But it's actually completely the other way around. But however, of course, that's not the case in our country. Next is actually what is sachet really? And if you notice the photo on the left, these are actually old packaging of Vaseline, Cream Cell, Palmolive, Head and Shoulders. So again, these are from Unilever, Procter and Gamble, these multinational companies, and that's actually like way back 2000 packaging. And these are described as small sealed packaging made of single or multiple layers of plastics that are intended to use one time only, whether by individual or family. And the problem with these kinds of plastic is that they are actually hard or sometimes even impossible to recycle. So if you notice here in the photo on the left, this is actually a study by Gaia that these kinds of packaging, it's actually multi-layered. So the tendency is that not all recycling facilities, that even if you have a recycling facility near you, not every facility has a kind of technology that would actually cater these kinds of packaging, because again, it's actually multi-layered. It's composed of different types of plastics, which is very difficult or sometimes even impossible to recycle. And these types of sachet, actually in our country, these are actually considered as residual waste. Residual meaning these are waste that is very, very hard to recycle. And these kinds of sachet actually composed of like 50, almost 50% of the residual waste in the country. And lastly, why the from of course from all those drivers that we discussed earlier, this has actually accumulated to 164 million of sachet being used every day by Filipinos. So imagine how much it is on every year. We actually kind of like use around 50 billion of sachet every year. So even up to date, there is still no regulation, no policy, or no plans on regulating these kinds of very, very problematic materials. Back to you, Gob. Yeah.
Thank you, Colleen, for giving us a brief overview of the current sachet situation in the Philippines. So now let's move on to a few case studies, which the rest of our panelists will present to us. So beginning with Mr. Jefferson Chua on e-commerce.
Thank you, Attorney Gov. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, this is actually quite a long presentation, but I'll try to limit it and be as fast as possible. So yeah, so the main question here is really, is shopping a climate justice issue? We know in Greenpeace that it's one of our core campaigns. Anything related to climate is immediately a climate justice issue. So one of the things that we observed in the pandemic is really the uptick in plastic waste brought about by the resurgence and the popularity of e-commerce companies such as Lazada and Shopee. So yeah, let's get to it. So broadly defined, it's really, climate justice is really this idea that climate concerns are really inseparable from different layers of human social life. It also assumes that the present state of affairs are unjust, and how absolutely everything in this world will have a detrimental effect to the environment because of our current systems. And lastly, climate justice acknowledges the necessity of systematic change to respond to how climate change affects all facets of human life. So there are three major themes here. First is that climate change affects different areas of society in different ways. Second is that impacts can magnify already existing social inequalities, and solutions should always include the idea of social cost. So broadly speaking, climate justice is a form of social justice, right? And in a nutshell, this is what it is, right? These are what we want out of climate justice: to fully understand the current climate emergency affects everyone, to make big polluters accountable not only for their carbon footprint, but also for the history of neglect of data, and actually active efforts to cover their complicity, and really find ways to lobby for more meaningful legislation and policy that will facilitate this total systematic shift. So how do we see e-commerce as a climate justice issue? So we see that by the end of 2022, the e-commerce ecosystem will be about $5.5 trillion in value. Here in the Philippines, the use of these platforms has increased by 55% from since when the pandemic began, reaching 55.8 million users by 2025. So that's more than half of, or actually half of our population. And we see here really the entrenchment, right, of e-commerce in our daily lives. Filipinos spend an average of 5.2 hours a day on the internet, actually, during the pandemic. And the country is really one of the most active users of e-commerce platforms in the Southeast Asia region. Another data point also suggested that before the pandemic, only 2% of Filipinos have been enrolled in online banking systems, and that has tripled and even quadrupled since the pandemic began. So we see here how e-commerce is becoming really a part of our lives, right? And of course, with that comes waste, right? Specifically single-use waste in the form of bubble wrap. So a few data points here to see how big this problem is. In China, for example, the Alibaba single day sale, which is considered the biggest sale in the world in terms of e-commerce, around $74.1 billion in 2020 were generated. Here, specifically in the Philippines, both Lazada and Shopee do not release specific sales data, but they do release these indirect forms of data. So Lazada saw 420 million minutes logged in 2020, and last year, Shopee sold 12 million items in the first 24 minutes of the 12-day sales. So we really see here how e-commerce is not just part of our lives, but also getting detrimental to the environment. So we see here how it is a climate justice issue. First, that it's really an issue of capitalism, right? It's really an issue of how every facet of our human lives are already, shall we say, dictated, right, by some form of capital exchange. Second, that e-commerce issue is also an issue of uneven geographical development. Before, we buying a very specific product from China or even Kazakhstan would be unthinkable, but now it's entirely possible because of this platform. And really, and I guess this is what I wanted to point out here, that e-commerce issue is an issue of logistics. It's really an issue of the first to last mile problem. How does one get a product safely from one producer to warehouse to doorstep? And because there are, well, at least 12 touch points in this entire process, every touch point of that will produce waste. So that's essentially the problem of e-commerce, that the waste problem is essentially a logistics problem. And the e-commerce ecosystem is steadily catching up. They think that being environmental is will rake them more money, right? And consumers agree to this. Around 50% of worldwide consumers think that they will actually pay more, you know, for more environmentally sustainable goods. Here in Lazada and Shopee, they have specific programs with Laz Earth, Shopee Show Support for Sustainable Brands, and Last Go Green, where they try to convince people that they're becoming more environmentally conscious by, one, reducing plastic or replacing single-use plastic with other forms of plastic, and also having this idea of environmental credits to convert into wallet credits every time they throw their single-use plastic to a partner institution. But the problem there is that while they are recognizing the need to be more conscious, the solutions they are pursuing do not go right at the heart of the problem, because they address it while protecting their profit margins. And real and lasting solutions require comprehensive, systematic shifts away from this profit-centric model. So to end, we see three ways out of this. First, we can call out policymakers to include the environmental agenda in roadmaps, such as the one in e-commerce for DTI. Second, we can also call out e-commerce platforms through the different channels to reveal, reduce, and redesign their current systems. And lastly, to really see the e-commerce problem as not just being a waste problem, as a lot of people frame it, and even the companies frame it, but really as a climate justice issue that affects all the facets of our human life. So any kind of intervention to make e-commerce systems more sustainable will necessarily have to include a total systematic shift away from this profit-centric model. So yeah, thank you. And that ends my presentation.
Thank you, Jeff, for that presentation, for sharing with us the solutions in the e-commerce, in the space of e-commerce. So moving now to our third panelist to share with us another possible solution, specifically that of an zero waste store. So allow me to call on Ms. Larnie Cancho.
Thank you, Goff. Allow me to share my screen, please, for this presentation. All right. I hope everyone sees my presentation. So a pleasant good afternoon to everyone here in the webinar. My name is Laarni Cansha, and I'm one of the 5 women co-founders of Back to Basics Eco Store. Okay, sorry. I think I need to have. Okay, Back to Basics Eco Store is a women-led social enterprise, and we are based in Quezon City, Philippines now. Currently, there are 3 women store associates that help us in our operations. So what does our Eco Store offer? We were established in 2019. We are a refillery grocery providing affordable and convenient access to home, pantry, and personal care products without the unnecessary and wasteful packaging. We make one zero waste journey easy. We are your so-called modern sari store because we want to make the zero waste journey easy. And why do that? Because we know that practicing this kind of lifestyle requires is being intentional and requires a lot of discipline. So with our store, we hope to help our customers sustain this kind of lifestyle. We challenge the traditional groceries set up in the country by offering refills of essential items in order to minimize and help divert single-use plastics from landfills. We even encourage our customers to use their own containers or be accepting of the clean repurposed containers that we offer in our store. We also offer our refill services, no matter the count, for donations without sachets. This picture in the right shows the one that we did when the community pantry was at that time was at its height last year. So one of our resounding mantras in the business is that going back to basics is good for the pocket, people, and planet. So these are the 3 P's that we emphasize to our customers. So it's good for the pocket because it definitely translates to money savings. Without the need for sachets, by just refilling, you can actually save. You can save and have more products with the same amount of peso that you use or that you pay for the product. It's good for the people because it makes you choose healthier products, because in the store we are not just after offering zero waste products, but we try to be gentle on Mother Earth as well. So we try to offer products that that are not only into single-use plastics but are not harmful to the environment as well. And of course, it's good for the planet because we help minimize the use of single-use plastics and divert these single SUPs from the landfill. So that's basically it in introducing our store. These are the women behind Back to Basics, and we are committed to helping everyone in their zero waste journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arnie. I used to live very near Maginhawa a very, very long time ago. Would have been great if there was if your Eco store already existed then. But that would have been very helpful to me as a student with no money.
Yeah, because you can buy even the littlest amount
Exactly.
without the sachet.
Thank you, Ms. Arnie. So now let's move on to another solution of working with communities. So let's listen to Ma'am Mercy for her as she shares her experiences with WOW Negros Oriental.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Mercy Ferrer. I am actually based in Negros Oriental in Valencia Municipality. Uh, and our organization is called the War on Waste, Break Free from Plastic Negros Oriental. Uh, we are, it was created in 2017. That was after me attending the first ever meeting of the Break Free from Plastic International. And in 2018, we, along with individuals in the academe and some environmental groups in Negros, or primarily in Dumaguete City, we said that why don't we set up an organization? So we called it WOW, WOW Negros Oriental, and added the Break Free from Plastic. In 2019, we're so fortunate that we were able to get some funding from the Gaia Network, the Break Free from Plastic Network, and we started to work and pilot 3 barangays in Dumaguete City. And in 2019, we added 2 more barangays, and these are all big coastal barangays in Dumaguete City. In 2020, the local government of Apo Island, Barangay Apo Island of Gawin Municipality in Negros Oriental, showed interest, expressed interest that they want to be part of the zero waste, the growing zero waste initiative in the province. And we started the work in Apo Island, a very famous island for diving and snorkeling. And it's at the height of the pandemic that we started to work in Apo Island. The photos that you're seeing here are at the very start of the works. The Apo Island Goes Zero Waste was placed sometime in August or September of 2020. And then the next photo is August 2. We had our very first waste assessment and brand audit in Apo Island. It was an amazing experience for the islanders because it's the first time that they did, picking up of waste and sorting it out. For them, it's like an amazing experience, not only to pick up the waste, but because they're used to it, but really sorting it out, counting, looking at all the colors. For them, that's very new for them. So we started at the height of the pandemic. Therefore, there were no tourists, zero tourists, both local and foreign. And so we were very happy. The organizers, the community organizers, were very happy. We were all out, all women workers, zero waste workers were there enjoying the island, teaching and sharing the work. So this next 4 photos, the first the one on the left, upper left, is a group photo of all the people joined by the local government representatives, the waste workers, and our team. The next one on the right is the very first materials recovery facility that was, stood up in Apo Island. They said, "Oh wow, what is this structure?" So they were really happy about it. The next photo, the one with orange shirts, these are both the waste workers and the local government officials of the Barangay Apo Island when they got a small contribution from Gaia's fundraising, supporting uh, uh, their situation during the pandemic. And the fourth one is our poster girl. She's our very, very industrious waste worker, Rowena Lumano. Next slide, please. The one on the left that you'll see, we're all wearing our blue. It says Go Zero Waste. And the one in gray or lighter green is our champion. He is Barangay Captain Mario Pascobello. He is one of the champions of the zero waste work in Apo Island. The next photo was taken last September 2021 when Apo Island was declared by the Zero Waste Network in the Philippines as the first zero waste island barangay in the whole of the country. The 2 slides is just saying thank you to Gaia's fundraising internationally, and we were able to give some goods and buy shirt that says we should not burn our future, and there's no way that we should burn in Apo Island. Next, will this be the last? I think the last slide will be, yes, that's it. Thank you very much. So before I end, I just want to say that getting out of Apo Island, I just want to say that in the work that we do, we are faced with a lot of challenges. And the biggest challenge that we have at this point with respect to the zero waste efforts that we're doing is for the Dumaguete City local government opting to get a pyrolysis incinerator to solve the problems, the waste problem in Dumaguete. And that in the coming days, in the coming months, in the coming years, especially post-election, we are going to fight this battle, ika nga. So I say thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Mercy, for sharing your story of working with the community in Apo Island. So once again, thank you to all our speakers and panelists for sharing all of your stories. Right? And just a reminder to all our attendees, if you have any questions for any of our panelists or for all of them, you feel free to type your questions in the Q&A section of this webinar. Moving on to the next part of our webinar, let's get to know our speakers a bit more. Let's pick their brains with a few questions. So let's start with Colleen. What is the impact of sachets and single-use plastic waste communities? What do you think? How do you think sachets impact communities?
Well, firstly, especially those that are prone for flash floods, it's very evident, especially during typhoon season, that these sachets actually come back to the communities, especially those that are living near the river or what we call estero, or those that are even smaller parts of the river. So the tendency is that it kind of like it blocks the riverway. So the chunk of that kind of waste, especially sachets, even if they are small, but in bulk, it's just so many, and it affects the drainage system of our especially in the urban areas. But not just in urban areas, actually, even in the rural areas, it's very evident in their waste system.
It's interesting because I agree with you. Like it's so evident whenever there are floods, just how much plastic and sachet waste there is in this country. And given that problem, what do you think the role of civil society organizations is in terms of promoting solutions against the use of sachets, the proliferation of plastic waste, and promoting zero waste solutions?
Well, for us civil society organizations, I think we are the necessary watchdogs for the environment and for the community. So it's not just calling on the government, of course, to create plans and policies to have a just transition towards zero waste, but as well as businesses to really have a complete R&D, or research and development, that transitions from a linear economy to circular economy, because this is what we've been seeing. Like, we're seeing false promises, we're seeing technically these are greenwashing and false solutions from these multinational companies who have been tagged as the top polluters. Like, every year with Break Free from Plastic, we're having that brand audit, and every year it's still the same companies.
Thank you, Colleen. But I'd like to focus on something interesting you said in terms of calling on the government to have solutions and plans in place. Why do you think a candidate should care about sachet phase out? Why would a candidate want to make that part of his campaign platform or her campaign platform?
Yeah, well, I think that would reflect on the candidate. If a candidate is really pro-poor and pro-environment, it should reflect on his or her plans. I mean, it's very the users of sachets are actually those that are coming from the lower income brackets. So that's the pattern that we're seeing. If they're really for the people, if they're really for the environment, and then this should actually be in their environmental agenda.
Jeff, you're raising your hand.
Yes, I wanted to add to that.
Sure, please.
It's also important to have leaders that will really prioritize sachet phase outs, especially if we frame the discussion of plastics in terms of climate, right? The current projection is that by, if I'm not mistaken, 2025, 2050, sorry, around almost 10 to 13% of total carbon emissions in the world will be coming from plastics, precisely because plastics itself is a byproduct of hydrocarbon extraction. No, so if the leaders that we need right now are should be climate leaders that see the problem from a systematic perspective, that see sachet phase outs as a necessary step to as a member of the global community to cut down our carbon emissions.
Actually, it's interesting, Jeff, that you talked about, like the danger that's in our very near future. But to circle back though to your presentation, can you like can we have sustainable development and the continued growth of e-commerce while at the same time, push for uh, zero waste solutions and a more sustainable way of running the economy?
It's actually so it's one of the more difficult questions that people like us always have to confront with, I guess. um I think the battle is in two fronts, right? First is, of course, you need to fight this idea that single-use plastics is proper, it's convenient, diba? That's really the reason why, for example, in e-commerce they use bubble wrap, right? Because people don't want to spend more for returning their products kapag na damage, right? That's a consideration, no? Without any thinking about the environment, no? And the other front that we need to fight in, no, is the pushback from these corporations that basically have an axe to grind when it comes to environmentalists like us, na parang sinasabi nila parati, no, we have the solutions. But no, like we are here essentially to point out na the solutions they have are really for themselves, right? Like it's really profit oriented. So it's a big challenge, no? It's difficult, but it is possible. The problem is that these big companies don't want to upscale small scale solutions. In e-commerce, for example, there are a lot of returnable packaging solutions around the world na. No, here there are a few in the Philippines, and yeah, but we see these companies still sticking to environmental credit points. No, tawag na to, magtatangkilik lang ng mga eco-friendly products, and that's it. No, wala na. Diba? Parang they need to push more, right? And invest more in small scale solutions that are scalable on a bigger scale.
Thanks, Jeff. Ma'am Mercy, you wanted to share something?
Yes. I think we're evident based, right? And working with the community and doing the waste assessment and brand audit is a very crucial step for communities first to acknowledge that there are in the WABA that we did in Apo Island, the sachet that we have documented is about 45% of all the residual waste. And what are the others? Plastic, the labo plastic, the sandbags, and other small wrappers, etc. So this is 45 or almost 50%. So that's an evident base, and people can say, hey, this is really problematic. So it's up to the community, the organizers, the people that are working to really present this to the local government. And you see, it's an island setting. Apo Island is an island. It's surrounded by waters, and there are neighboring islands. So this is also the problem that the other islands are having. So they share common water, share common waste, etc. So I think one issue and one recommendation is really to have that evidence that we can no longer, as an island, as a community, to be bombarded with all the sachets. So maybe that's the initial part. I know it's a long and it's a big battle, but we present that to the local government officials. I think we can move forward when it comes to making sure that not only sachets will be regulated. Second, I think is that speaking for Negros Oriental, the province has just passed a regulation on plastic and banning of single-use plastic. I think we have to push more in terms of the sachet issue, but then presenting them with data that this is so problematic that there is a need to regulate things, and then of course the role of the bigger organizations in playing their part as to the policy level and etc. So that's my thing.
Thank, thank you, Ma'am Maurice. It's interesting. So, as panelists, you've all talked about like the role of civil society, the role of the government in terms of regulating plastics. But I think Jeff touched on there's also the role of businesses. So I'm curious about that though. Like, and I think it ties into one of the questions that one of our attendees, or two questions actually, I think two related questions that our attendees posted. And like, assuming you have a company that is willing to adopt a sustainable approach to doing business, how profitable is it for them? Is there a financial incentive for companies to actually adopt zero waste solutions? And on that note, I'll read out one question from Lottie Fraser. Hi all, a question for Arnie. Can you give some more information on the profitability of the eco store versus a traditional sari-sari store? How can we incentivize the zero waste model for business owners who are primarily concerned with financial sustainability? And a related question by an anonymous attendee, for what policies would help enterprises like yours thrive?
Okay. Yes, thank you for that question. And in fact, that's what we're here for, because we want to, of course, let everyone know our experience, because we have just currently launched our store to the public. We are a startup zero waste store, although we've been in operation since 2019, but the pandemic actually hit us, so we just had to settle for an online delivery, which, while it did well in its own right, but it's not really what we've envisioned when we started the store. So it's just this year. And in terms of experience, because you're asking about profitability, and that's why I wanted to inject a bit of information earlier when the other panelists were talking about what incentives or how can the government help, or other policies that can be drawn for this taking out the sachet in the economy, right? So incentivizing really is a big step for this business. For us, we're just a small business now. And to be honest with it, it's quite challenging to do this startup, because a lot of zero waste journey, a lot of those who are into the zero waste journey are also interested in setting up this kind of store. And when they ask how to do that, it's not that simple. If I may be honest with it, it's not that simple, because we have to look for different suppliers that will be aligned with our advocacy. It's not just a matter of, providing these essentials to our customers. And of course, as a business, because we're set up as a regular business and there's no current policy or incentives that provide startup advocacy driven like this one, a zero waste store, where we could be provided with some tax incentives perhaps, or some relief, or even maybe friendlier financing terms. Because one of the things that we realize in setting up the store is, because we want to provide a lot of options to our customers. We want to be like a grocery store, because one of the things that consumers would go to groceries because of the convenience of getting everything they need for their household, right? So we want to be like this grocery, except that we don't offer the products in single-use plastics, and they have the option to refill. So if we need to get all of these items, we need to put up, we need to talk to several suppliers. We need lots of funds, because we have to buy in bulk. And if we have to buy in bulk, that means we need lots of capital for that. So in setting up this store, businesses like us would need incentives on providing us some friendlier financing terms. And also, because we want to be visible to the public, we need to provide some options, like, for example, free delivery, or even free shipping, right? So we need to talk to several suppliers. We need lots of funds. We need to buy in bulk. And if we have to buy in bulk, that means we need lots of capital for that. So in setting up this store, businesses like us would need incentives on providing us some friendlier financing terms. And also, because we want to be visible to the public, rent a good place, right? A good location. We want to be accessible also, just like how the grocery stores are set up now. So that's another challenge for us zero waste stores. So I guess it would help now in terms of profitability if the government, or if there would be a policy that would incentivize businesses, advocacy-driven businesses like us, to be given some reliefs on certain government obligations. Like we don't ask for being exempted now, but at least some relief so that we can roll out and then have some grace period to be known to the public. And that, because this one requires also educating the customers. So it's not as if everyone is into practicing zero waste. So in fact, some of the walk-in, they have to we have to educate them what are the options, and then they just have to feel the experience first. So there. So, and even for the top corporations, I think, because as you've said, Jeff, right, that it's all about profit. Because at the end of the day, truly, if you're a corporation that protects the profit of the shareholders, you would really need to look into protecting also the profit. So I guess providing incentives related to
Mm.
really addressing that. Now, if you want really to stop, for them to stop producing the sachet. So it's not just giving incentives na environmental points, but it's them. What is it in there for them that will help them stop? What are the alternatives? Because I will have an alternative earnings if I stop sachets and do this instead. So there. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnie. It's very interesting to hear, the challenges,
Yeah,
and
it's
and I,
challenging.
I could totally see how incentives would definitely be a great way to encourage more zero waste stores. And certainly back to Jeff. What about so Arnie talked to us about an eco waste store. Like, what about manufacturers in general, and large sellers in e-commerce platforms? What can we, how can we convince them to adopt zero waste and circular economy and sustainable approaches to business?
I think again it involves different approaches from different sectors. So for one, as citizens, it has been shown that petitions do have some sort of power. They influence discourse, right? They influence how people talk about things. So I think one of the attendees posed a question. I answered it on sa Q&A, but yeah, one of the attendees asked a while ago about this petition, the Youth Strike for Climate. So we're partners with them in that petition. And to date, I think there are around, let me check, 20,231 signatures already for that. And we've sent out letters to both Lazada and Shopee to reveal, reduce, and redesign. Basically, the calls to action natin sa Lazada and Shopee. And now, as we see, they did respond to our calls rather indirectly, kasi before this movement wala ding there wasn't any environmental consciousness in these platforms. So now that the talk has started, right, like, okay, they're doing Las Earth, they're doing this and that, I think that's the next step. Like, how do we elevate the discourse, right? And one of the things that that we can do is actually to go on lobbying for inline agencies, in commerce groups, for example. And this requires a lot of organization on our part, no, na parang we need to gather people together and go to Congress, go to DTI, go to here and there to influence how people think about roadmaps, for example, policies, for example, that will shift to a more sustainable economy. One of the bills that are currently being discussed right now is extended producer responsibility, right? This is one of the key battlegrounds that we see in the near future when it comes to having big businesses become accountable for the waste that they produce. So, and of course, in its current form, it still has a lot of problems. So the work continues, right? So yeah. So first is the civil society level, and second is the policy level. And through this, we hopefully we can change how corporate setups are run here in the Philippines to become more sustainable, especially since we are one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change, right? So it also pays for them to be more sustainable because they won't have a country to run their business to if we get swallowed by the effects of climate change as well.
Thank you, Jeff. I mean, it's interesting listening to all of you. I mean, you talk about you're running your own campaigns, and yet a lot of it really goes back to how the government, what the policies of the government are, and how it's important to really convince them to adopt, you know, concrete plans. And I'd like to, point to a particular question raised by one of the attendees. But what is the government's view and solution to the growing plastic waste? This question comes to us from Monica. I'm not gonna pronounce her last name. I'm gonna end up butchering it. To Monica from Friends of the Earth, Slovakia. So what is the current government's view and solution to the growing plastic waste problem? Up to anyone.
Okay, I'll answer the question. Like Jeff mentioned earlier, they actually focus on the EPR, or extended producer's responsibility. But the EPR that we saw is that it's still focused on the downstream approach. It's still more on recovery, recycling, but not much on redesigning and increasing the reusability of of products and packaging. So there wasn't really much on um on that. It's actually up to the BICAM level. It's due for BICAM conference, and for regulating these kinds of materials like sachets and single-use plastics. Up to date, there's still none.
So I'm curious though, are there any existing incentives, for instance, to Ms. Arnie or to Jeff, or are there actually any existing government programs that help stores like back to basics, or that would actually, like, if I were a seller, I go to I register for Lazada. Is there any reason? Is there any government policy that would actually encourage me to not use plastic bubble wraps, to find a little less pollutive packaging?
There's currently none for businesses like us. We're just like any regular small, medium, the SMEs. So we just have to go through the process, everything from taxation to business registration. So we're hoping at least that maybe the government can, incentivize these kinds of stores so that maybe like lower business tax for the LGUs, right? Or sales tax. That's all, because the tax incentive that we're enjoying right now, the tax exemption, is under the BMBE program, which is not related into having a zero waste store. So for us, we don't know any at the moment. So or any regular business or any regular small business, micro.
Thank you. Well, it's a little unfortunate that there aren't any, and perhaps that is really something that should be the focus of a campaign, right? That possibly a new bill in Congress that will really provide incentives for sustainable business practices. Just shifting the conversation a bit into from we've talked about government, talked about business. I'd like to talk to Mercy more about working with communities. I mean, first of all, like what inspired you to work with an island barangay, and how have the people responded to your proposed, to the whole of the zero waste campaign and the adoption of zero waste solutions?
Um, okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, first, Apo Island is a very beautiful island. It's really like it's a protected area, a landscape and seascape protected under the Protected Area Management Bureau of the Department of Environment. So why not, right? But then at the same time, there's a very big challenge. In 2018, the local government of Apo Island did an island-wide survey and asked the question, what's the biggest problem that we are facing in the island? And overwhelmingly, the people said, the islanders said, it's the waste problem. And it's a reality that in 20, from 27, 2015, 2018, Apo Island is so dirty. You just can't see that because people were concentrated in the coastal water. But it's in the innermost part of the island, the medyo bulubundukin part of the island. So in 2018, they did a survey. In 2019, they were really forced to do something and implement the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. So, and then in 2019, we met them and they said, wow, you're doing this in Dumaguete. Why don't you come and work with us and introduce it to the community? And that's what we did. And they liked it. They, no less than the kapitan, the chief of the barangay, uh, said, come and visit us and stay with us. And that started it. So it's a both the challenge to face that big problem and at the same time, wow, we can swim with the turtles, we can do snorkeling and diving. So that's really the motivation there. So that really made us decide to focus on this community because when you focus on a protected island, you can actually say, hey, it's not only like this is um, a very good opportunity for the government to see that a protected place like Apo Island should really be protected not only because of its beauty, but because one important ingredient in managing sustainable islands is really facing up and really looking at the waste issues as a as an upstream issue and not as a waste as an end of the pipe issue. So that really motivated us and what made us decide. And I think the other part of that is since it's the pandemic, wow, this is really the great opportunity for us to focus on the people with sans the tourists, without the tourists. So the people receive us. The people were overwhelmingly supportive of the cause, and they said they had one big skill that they learned from the zero waste work, and that is segregating their waste. You think of it like as a simple thing, but for them, they're very thankful that they know how to identify their waste. What are the toxic ones? What are the recyclable ones? What are the malata or the biodegradable ones? So this is really like the big thing for them, for the communities. And the impact is really big in terms of like, it's a cleaner environment. More small gardens were set up by the people because they only have small houses na close to one another. They have solar panels there, very small size solar panels. They do rainwater harvesting there because it's such a small island, no? And so that really made us decide that we really need to focus on that. And then the other thing is that the interests of the local government, having champions from the local government, and really um, uh, the people were saying this is a big change. The challenge that we have now from 2020 is that making it very understandable as far as the DNR is concerned, or the Protected Area Management Bureau, that this is not just one area of their work that they need to work on, but they need to sustain this because they manage the whole island. So that's it. No, and the big challenge now is that uh, because the restriction is very lax now, more and more tourists are coming in, both international and local, and so we are now awaiting for uh, the municipality of Darwin to affirm the regulation, the plastic regulation of the barangay to ban single-use plastics coming into the island. They haven't done that. We are following it up and we hope that it will be done soon because what we wanted and what the community wants is for plastic to be regulated to not to for it not to enter like plastic bottles, not to enter the island. But there are other opinions. different opinions on that matter. So we need to lobby more or hard on that, so that we will really prevent the coming in of more plastic. And last but not the least is that the household segregation, household minimization of waste is not enough. We need to set up local businesses such as Sari Sari. Imagine the population of Apo Island is about 1,000. There are about 200 households. And within the island, there are more than 20 Sari Sari stores or even more. Imagine that. So they're selling all the sachets, selling all the plastic bags there. And so these are the things that we really want. So we as part of the work that we're doing, want to also introduce the possibility of a zero waste store. And we are starting with the cooperative in the island. So these are the efforts and the initiatives so that we will complete the whole picture. But again, it's not yet complete. It still will not be complete because no man is an island, right? Apo Island is very much impacted by the waste from Cebu, by the waste from Mindanao, by the waste from the mainland Negros Oriental. So again, this is an all effort thing that if Apo Island is doing zero waste, man, we should be doing zero waste in all of the other islands as well. So yeah.
I'm glad you brought up that point. And it's amazing what you guys have been able to do, what the people of Apo Island have been able to do in achieving a zero waste local economy. But I'm curious though, given your successes, how do you think we can transpose that into other? Can we adopt that in other communities? Is it even possible to do that? Like, in a context that you're not dealing with an island barangay, for instance. And on a related note, I also like to loop in a question from one of our participants, from Miss Justine Villano. I hope that's a miss. uh, from Mr. or Miss Justine Villano. In relation to that, are there any from any of our speakers? Do you have any concrete plans in the future for specific sachet phase out programs in different regions?
Okay. Yeah, let me start with, can it be replicated in both island setting and non-island setting? Well, in the non-island setting, we have a lot of examples already in the Philippines, like Malabon, Navotas. But in an island setting, yes, 100% yes. In fact, Siquijor, a provincial island, has started already, and they're doing amazing work in Siquijor. But of course, they have 5 municipalities, I believe. So that's about it's tough. Then there are islands in Bohol that are also joining us in starting to do the work in different islands, smaller islands in Bohol. So yes, it can be replicated, but the crucial part there is the buy-in of the local governments. That's why you really have to present the viability of the project, and it is viable. Now the issue is like, how can we sustain this? That's why there's a need for, we're talking in the Zero Waste Cities project, that there's a need for us to really have these meetings, this both online and meetings with local governments and with people on the ground to really have that meeting of islanders, of both the civil society and the local governments, because we are all affected. I will just focus on Apo Island, Cebu, Siquijor, Bohol. These are all very much connected, no? You can see the plastic that are coming from Cebu. You can see the as far as Dipolog, you can see the plastic coming from Dipolog. So if we don't do something in those other islands, we cannot achieve really the full, zero waste as it is. That's why, again, it's up to us, the civil society and the local government. That's why I think an electoral agenda, even if this coming Monday is the election, I think it's crucial for us and it's critical for us to really make this as a priority agenda for as our environmental agenda. It's not only the sachet, but also the other plastics that are single use. So I'll stop there.
I'd like, thank you. So we've talked about, again, we've talked about engaging engaging businesses, engaging the government, uh, engaging civil society organizations. But there's an interesting question from one of our participants. How about engaging the youth? Like, how do we encourage the youth to be more passionate and mindful of their plastic use? We all know, I'll translate it into English. So we all know how big a part of the population the youth are. Do we need a law to scare them into compliance? Or will environmental education be enough? This is a question from Theodore J. Molina. Yes, Jeff, you're raising your hand. Please feel free.
I'll answer that. Actually, that's a very legitimate question. Last year, the Lancet released a worldwide study on climate anxiety and the youth, and one of the worst scoring countries actually was the Philippines. A significant amount of our youth are scared, no, of the incoming climate catastrophe. What a lot of media outlets say that we have 3 years to avert the worst, but actually the time to act is now. That 3 years is ano na lang yan, allowance na lang yan kasi we're really going into emergency like code red mode, right? And given that reality, no, we are actually seeing a lot of youth groups standing up for themselves, no. So I guess I want to also like deepen the question or challenge it and say na actually what can we learn from the youth, no. I think I think it's also important to see that, because like you'd be surprised that the like youth representatives who go on to these climate strikes, to a lot of these efforts, no, to raise awareness for the regarding the environment, they have such deep knowledge that sometimes we're actually quite surprised, like like we didn't know that, no. So it's actually humbling, no. So I guess that's really the issue here, no, like how do we integrate the raw energy that youth groups have, you know, into a more concerted effort that will hopefully meaningfully change policy. Now, I think that's the greater challenge than just inspiring the youth or getting them to be more concerned, because they're already doing that themselves. What's more important to capacitate really is how can we work together, you know. So yeah, one way is at least through Greenpeace. We have a lot of petitions, we have a lot of youth elections work. A while ago the video was shown on Love 52, and yeah, the outpouring of support from the youth is nothing short of astonishing, really, and inspiring for all of us also. So yeah, so I think that's really the fight. Like, how do we create more avenues of collaboration to really change systems?
Thanks, Jeff. And I actually like to share, Justine's comment in the chat box, because I actually agree with that, and I think something we will probably all agree with. As a 16-year-old, my grandparents don't believe in climate change. So there's also a need to educate parents or grandparents, and I totally agree. Right? That is absolutely right. It's the youth are actually easier to talk to in terms of climate change and sustainable solutions. It's actually people my age that are much more difficult, and older that are much more difficult to convince. So thank you, Jeff.
I'd like to add.
Sure, please, Colleen.
Yeah. I'd like to add, as the youngest person, I think, in the in the panelists. Just kidding. Yeah, that's the thing. Awareness in terms of the youth is not that hard. I mean, we're not that. It's not hard to convince the youth to do something, but the part of of the act part, that's where it becomes critical, because I mean, some efforts are just just to feel good and everything, but it doesn't really make that much impact. Or they have an awareness, but they don't know what to do with the awareness. So I think in terms of encouraging, that's actually not a problem. In terms of what do we do with Like how do we take a collective action? I think that's the challenge.
Ma'am Mercy.
Yeah, I'd like to do a special shout out here because we have an amazing youth group here, the Zero Waste Youth, Negros Oriental, the student councils that are really very active. So I think for the questions that we have, there are youth that are still there waiting to be tapped. We create that venues, we create that, that's what Jeff said, but they're very ready, they're very willing and able, they're very creative. So I just want to add that point there.
Thank you. Um, I'd like to I'd like to go through some of the questions that we haven't been able to go through from the participants, and I think one takes us back to the question of e-commerce. But any panelist, please feel free to answer. So we have one from an anonymous attendee. Is there a possibility to request delivery services to use reused paper bags, old magazines, etc., to wrap the parcels that we want delivered?
Okay, let me get that. One of the things that we noticed during the course of our e-commerce campaign is that Lazada and Shopee, for some weird reason, are quietly changing their policies. No, specifically Shopee. They have instructed sellers. We have a few seller contacts, and they told us that Shopee has given them this kind of like change in policy, saying that okay, it's time to reduce bubble wrap, ganyan. Encourage ang pagpalit to more sustainable packaging materials, which struck us as weird, no? Because you would think that these companies will actually publicize that because it's actually going to help them, no? Brighten up their image. So it's very weird, and we're still trying to figure that out, like why that is the case, right? But I guess the point here is that the companies themselves are already doing it, but our our mission, should you say, is to tell them that it shouldn't stop there, right? Like switching materials is just a band-aid solution
Right.
to the more systematic problem of unfettered consumerism. For example, one of the things that we observed in our campaign is that people tend to order different items separately. So when it doesn't need to be the case, right? So one of the solutions that one of our supporters has suggested, no, was why don't we force or convince Lazada and Shopee to have more integrated systems when it comes to having parcels and orders, na like they'll go to this particular staging area, tapos all the orders will be packed there, and then they will be packed in a less plastic and more sustainable packaging na iisa lang, no? So there are those different suggestions that we're also trying to well, lobby, no, for ano to both Lazada and Shopee. So yeah, so it's really not just the change in materials, but really a systematic shift away. But regarding the question of having a petition to start that, by all means, we'd be gladly, we'd be so happy to help in trying to craft a petition like that para maging ano tayo, lahat tayo sabay-sabay sa efforts natin.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Thanks, Jeff. It's very interesting to know that the Shopee and Lazada have started doing that, and it's even more interesting to know that they've done it quietly. So that's very interesting. Arnie, yeah, you have some. Please feel free to.
Yes, I guess one thing that's not being seen also from the Shopee Lazada thing, the reason why these platforms require the bubble wraps and all is because the customers or most customers are still very particular on receiving their products in good condition, which we all want. But some customers, even if it's just something that are wherein bubble wrap is not really necessary, they're just very particular in that. and that gives a disincentive to the sellers. And as we know, if you're a Shopee or Lazada seller, you're very particular on customer rating because that affects the saleability of your products or being a shop that's known not to others. So I think it's also important for me, because I've been a Shopee, I am a Shopee seller too, to more than just informing the customers that you will receive these items in repurposed papers or
Mm.
wrappers, is providing incentive to the customers that if you do not require bubble wraps or something or new
Mhm.
materials, if it's okay with you, maybe you will also get some points. Therefore, the sellers will not be penalized, and the customers will also be incentivized so that they will not give any bad rating to the sellers who are very particular in that. And of course, Shopee would want good rating in general for all its sellers. So I think it also trickles down to the customer level, if we can
Mhm.
address that part there.
Thank you, Arnie. Yeah, that's true. That's true. There are a lot of customers. I mean, I get Shopee and Lazada products of things, and there's so much tape, there's so much bubble wrap, and it's not breakable. Like I'm pretty sure it would have survived without all of that. So that's yeah, it's very true. I think customer preference should also be moved towards changing customer preference, right?
Yeah.
But switching from just Lazada sellers or so online platform sellers and the online platforms. What about other larger manufacturers? And I'd like to bring in a question from Nancy May Batyon Omandam. Sorry, I hope I pronounced that right. I believe there are other organizations which really do the brand audit. Granted that these have been presented and are known, are there manufacturing companies which have expressed their intent to resort to environmental packaging of their products? So that we know, as Java shared as Lazada and Shopee as a platform of encourage the use of less bubble wrap, less plastic. But what about manufacturing companies? Or do we know of any manufacturing companies that have actually expressed a desire or intent to use more environmentally friendly packaging? Yes, Jeff. Please just feel free to talk.
Okay, sige. Thank you for that question. One of the things that we also notice in all of these top polluters is that all of them have environmental commitments. Okay, specifically Coke has a drive to be 100% recyclable in their packaging. Also Nestle, which aims to have 100% recyclable or reusable by 2025, which is, frankly speaking, a lot of hokey. We we like to think that recycling is the be all end all of environmentalism, right? It's a product of a lot of lobbying from these companies, actually. What we want, no, is for them to be really really accountable, no, to those promises and commitments. That's why not only do we do the brand audits as a way to show them that you're not doing your job, no, but also we sometimes return the waste to them as a form of protest, no? Because what they're doing is they're essentially not fulfilling their end of the bargain, right? And what's worse is that a lot of these companies have solutions that actually cause harm in the environment as well. If we hear the terms plastic credit, no, carbon credit, uh, all of these different ways of rationalizing their environmentalism is really for profit, for them. And at the end of the day, for example, like a good example here would be the trash to cash programs of Nestle, where they partner with cement companies, no, and malls as collection sites for their plastic waste. So what they do is they collect plastic from different areas around the Philippines. If I remember correctly, Bacolod is really one of the areas that Nestle invests a lot in, no, when it comes to these programs. So people put their plastic there, no, And then Nestle gets that, and then of course they sell it to through AMOA, no, to cement companies who in turn use that to turn into pellets by burning it or some other chemical process that is also harmful to the environment to become part of cement. No, so from an outsider's perspective, you'd see, oh wow, Nestle is doing their part. They're handling their own waste. But like what is not discussed is what's the environmental and social cost of their processing of waste. At the end of the day, it hurts more, no? And like Ma'am Mercy also said something a while ago about waste energy, and incinerators that are also becoming a thing for these corporations to address their plastic pollution. So there are commitments, but they're also hokey, and we need to call them out on that at a constant rate. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for that insightful answer. And thank you to all our speakers and panelists for sharing your stories, your experiences, for giving us insights on solutions to reduce plastic waste. Now, at this point, I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about Gaia Asia Pacific's newest publication. So, island communities face challenges when confronted with the problems posed by single-use plastic. So, as a response to these challenges, Gaia Asia Pacific is launching their latest publication, Community Voices: Impacts of Single-Use Plastic Regulations on Philippine Coastal Communities. This publication highlights different experiences of waste management implementers from Siquijor, San Carlos City, and Dumaguete City in implementing their single-use plastic regulations. The link will be to that publication will be shared in the chat box. And we hope that by sharing these stories, we will inspire more development organizations, local governments, impact investors, financing institutions to develop portfolios for zero waste initiatives. Now, we're down to our last 2 minutes. If there are any questions that I wasn't able to go through, I sincerely apologize. But as I mentioned, you may post them at the Facebook page, and we will try our very best to answer them. Like, you can post them even after we end this webinar. And just for the last couple of minutes we have, I'd like to ask the panelists if they have for any final thoughts and key takeaways they'd like to share with all the attendees. I'll start with Colleen.
Yes. Yeah, especially to our fellow Filipinos, this coming elections, we hope that everyone would vote not just for the country but for our environment. And this webinar is a reminder for us to, of course, to vote for people who are pro people, who are pro poor and pro environment. And yeah, let's and we hope that it does not end on the elections, but after that, it would actually reflect on their electoral agenda in their first 100 days. So yeah. Thank you so much, Gaia, for organizing this webinar.
Thanks, Colleen. Jeff?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Colleen said, that one of the most glaring absences in the debates in our electoral season, is the environmental agenda. No one's talking about it at all. If meron one or two candidates, that's it. So we see how critical voting for the environment is, right? But also, I think on a more cardinal level, it's really voting for our future. It's really voting for our loved ones, our children, our relatives, who will also bear the brunt of climate change if we don't elect the right leaders. So it's all up to us, and I'm actually anxious about the election. So hopefully everything's going to be fine. And yeah, thank you very much, Gaia, for organizing this.
Thank you, Jeff. Arnie?
a call for everyone to use our power of choice wisely, vote for the right candidate who will fight for our environment, for our future, and vote also wisely with your peso by choosing the right products that will not contribute to waste pollution. Thank you.
Thanks, Arnie. That's so true. Both with your pen and with your wallet.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
I'll
Uh, Thank you.
oh,
Ma'am Mercy,
all right.
final.
I'll be more specific, and I'm speaking from the local part. I hope fellow Dumagueteños and Negrense Oriental will not vote for the present dispensation we have. The current mayor and his enablers uh, in this coming election, because he will destroy the very fabric of Dumaguete City by setting up the reclamation project and also not really following, basic rules and guidelines as far as environmental protection and plastic issues are concerned. The present dispensation is really one of the worst in terms of the environment. So please, if you're listening, fellow Dumagueteños and Negrense, please do not vote for the current dispensation. So, and for the fellow Filipinos, let's vote with our conscience and with our spirit, because it's our sambayanan who will be very much affected. So thank you, Gaia. Thank you, Greenpeace, for this opportunity. Thank you to my fellow speakers, so inspired by your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Mercy. And thank you so much to all our speakers. It was an inspiring, very insightful discussion, and I'm sure we all learned a lot from this webinar. And we wish you continued success in all your in all your endeavors and all your campaigns. So once again, thank you, Colleen, Jeff, Arnie, Mercy, for sharing your stories this afternoon. We hope that everyone watching is inspired to reduce their waste footprint. And to the participants, we hope you have enjoyed this session and you've learned a lot. We also hope that you will share the recording of today's session. It will be posted on the Gaia website, Facebook, and YouTube channel. So once again, thank you to the panelists, participants, and everyone for joining us today. This has been Gob from the Eco Waste Coalition. See you all in our next webinar. Thank you and good afternoon.